Why, Peter, is it so problematic for a regional Fed president to get involved in a state's political question, such as changing its education policy?
Well, to be clear, I have no informed view on what the state of Minnesota and its people should do to its constitution with respect to education policy. And I think the point is that the Fed really doesn't either, or shouldn't at least. Now, if Neel Kashkari as a citizen wants to be involved in political activity, of course, that's every citizen's right. But what's happening here is that President Kashkari is using his stature and status, not only as president of the Minneapolis Fed, but the prestige of the Federal Reserve itself, to lend an idea of neutrality, nonpartisanship to this divisive idea. And this is an area where people's value judgments are going to differ. And that cheapens the enterprise of what is the Fed's technocratic expertise and independence. And that's what makes me feel cautious, even as I, again, profess no insights at all into the underlying issue itself.
So, Peter, I mean, I just want to be clear as to what you're quibbling here with, because on the outside edges of this, a lot of what he is supporting isn't really outside the realm of what we've heard other Fed presidents speak about in more broader terms. Is your issue more that he was specifically advocating for this proposed constitutional amendment, or do you have a broader issue with him speaking about this at all?
No, ironically, I think I tend to come down among Fed watchers and others in favor of a more expansive view of what monetary policy is and can be. For example, more central banks, although not the Fed, have started to think about how climate change is related to monetary and financial regulatory policy, and I think that is completely appropriate. Talk about research. Even if you've got ideas based on this research that might require some public comment, I think that's all to the good. What's happened here, though, is that President Kashkari has become the face of an amendment, of a campaign to take to the voters to amend the Constitution. That's where I have a problem, because it's so highly politicized that I worry about the blowback, not only to the Minneapolis Fed, but to the Federal Reserve System itself and to the entire concept of this fragile idea of central bank independence.
So it's okay that the Minneapolis Fed is involved in this kind of research, because I know that he's teamed up with Abigail Wozniak, who is the economics professor at Notre Dame, to become the first head of the Minneapolis Fed's Opportunity and Inclusive Growth Institute, to do more research on inequality, which is something that, to Romaine's point, others have spoken about in the past, Janet Yellen among them, as an issue that kind of weighs on the economy. It's okay for him to do that, but to become kind of the point person, the front man for this effort in a political process is a problematic part?
That's exactly right. I mean, not only Janet Yellen, I mean, the issue of income and wealth inequality was the banner topic for the 1998 Kansas City-Jackson Hole Fed Symposium. Totally appropriate for President Kashkari to devote research resources into understanding problems of inequality, even education. Although there are critics of this, to be clear, some people see this as mission creep. I'm not one of those critics. If the Fed and the reserve banks think that they should put a research priority around issues that are central to or adjacent to or even indirectly connected with monetary policy and financial stability, more power to them. But the press in Minnesota is publicly calling this constitutional amendment and identifying it with Neel Kashkari and the Federal Reserve. That's problematic.
Peter, do you have a problem when when we heard people like Fed Chairman Bernanke talk about the need for fiscal consolidation? Because here is something that was extremely highly politicized, whether we're going to need to cut Social Security or Medicare down the road, really arguably doesn't have anything to do with monetary policy. But you never really hear much criticism towards central bankers when they wade out of monetary policy and into these divisive political questions like fiscal policy. Does that also, in your view, sort of cheapen the neutrality and independence and technocracy of the Federal Reserve when they wade into a question like that?
I think the dividing line is not weighing in. It's not opining. It's not thinking about the expertise that Chairman Bernanke or President Kashkari have developed as central bankers that might inform public policy discussions. Some people have said, oh, the Fed should stick to its knitting. But to be clear, the Fed's knitting has always been the economy writ large. It's a pretty broad mandate. If Ben Bernanke had then had written down, here's what we need to do to amend the U.S. Constitution. I'm putting forward the Bernanke plan. I'm going to hold town hall meetings to convince voters to hold a constitutional convention to rewrite the U.S. Constitution in my image. Yeah, I would be one of his chief critics. Talking about policy is okay. Trying to change the laws and becoming a public face for legal change, that's where I think it's more problematic.
All right, Peter Conti-Brown of the Wharton School at University of Pennsylvania, thank you so much. And by the way, we did reach out to Neel Kashkari at the Minneapolis Fed. He declined an interview.